The heat wave alert goes up to the highest level in South Korea amid extreme heat causing illness across the country. Today, the capital Seoul saw the mercury rise to 35 degrees Celsius on average. We go live to the scene. Consumer Prices Index in July grew at the smallest rate in about 2 years. But concerns linger as prices could rebound given the current energy prices and weather variables. The 25th World Scout Jamboree brings thousands of young people from around the globe in South Korea's Saemangeum. The opening ceremony kicks off this evening. It's August 2nd, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin with the relentless heat wave that has been gripping the country for days now. Daytime high temperatures today surpassed 35 degrees Celsius in many parts of the country. For more details on the ground, we connect live to our reporter Cheonggyecheon in central Seoul. Yoo-jin, it's a little past 6 p.m., so how is the situation out there?
Yes, well, hello, Jong-min. I'm currently out here in Cheonggyecheon Street in central Seoul, which is one of the most popular spots that people visit to beat the heat in the city. And let me tell you, the weather here is and has been scorching and sweltering. Less than 5 minutes after I got out of the van, I saw just sweat dripping off of my body. And the temperature started cooling off a bit as we're heading into the evening hours, but it's still 32 degrees Celsius here in capital Seoul, and seems like we're going to experience another tropical night. But earlier in the day, we saw temperatures soar higher. We saw the mercury soar up to 37 degrees in the east coast city of Gangneung and 36 degrees Celsius in cities of Gwangju and Daegu. So in response amid this prolonged and intense heat wave, the Interior Ministry has raised the heat crisis level to the highest severe from the second highest alert on Tuesday evening for the first time in 4 years. That is since 2019. Now this level is issued when the feels like temperature is forecast to reach 35 degrees Celsius or above for 3 or more days in over 40% of the country's weather report districts, or when the temperature is expected to heat 38 degrees Celsius or above in 10% of the weather districts. And so people are really doing all that they can to find relief for the heat. For example, seeking out shade. Let's take a listen to what some of them have to say.
I feel like the weather is even hotter than yesterday. Dipping my toes in the cool water feels good.
And in Spain now is the same here. Very, very hot. Extreme.
Right, Eugene, no wonder people are seeking relief from the heat. This summer heat has been deadly. What can you tell us about that and what's being done about it?
You're right, Chong-min. So unfortunately, at least 16 people have died due to heat-related illnesses here in the country this year. That's according to the latest data provided by the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency as of Wednesday, 4 p.m. And I want to point out that the situation this year is much severe than last year because this number is almost 3 times of what was reported during the same period of last year. So in response, the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters has ordered relevant government ministries and local governments to really do all they can, such as coming up with measures to support people who are especially vulnerable to the heat, for example, the elderly, construction workers, or farmers, and also strengthen real-time monitoring. And to give a word of advice, people should refrain from going outdoors during the hottest time of the day, which is between noon and 5 p.m. Also, you should stay hydrated, drink plenty of water, and if you're feeling dizzy, have a headache, or feel nauseous, you shouldn't hesitate to really reach out for help or go visit a doctor, because those are one of the most common symptoms of heat-related illness. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Tony.
Right, thank you, Eugene. Stay safe out there. South Korea's electricity demand is anticipated to reach its peak next week amid the scorching heat wave. According to the Industry Ministry, on Wednesday, the electricity demand estimate will go up to its highest of 97.8 gigawatts on August 10th. The government explains that it will be able to cover the supply regardless of the lowered energy potential caused by the recent shutdown and operation delay of some power plants in the country. But the nation is keeping an eye on the situation as there are still concerns about electricity supply capacities after the Hanbit 2 nuclear reactor suddenly stopped operating since last week and the typhoon Khanun approaching from the south. The Korean Disease Control Agency says new COVID infections is at 60% of last year's winter peak. Amid a concerning rise in new cases, it is carefully considering when exactly it'll further lower the infectious disease level of COVID-19. The lowering means a complete lifting of the mask mandate even for medical facilities. Shin Se-byuk has more.
The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency says the timeline for lowering the infectious disease level of COVID-19 will be handled with more care. According to the head of the KDCA, Cheonggyecheon, on Wednesday, the number of new infections is at 60% of last winter's peak. She also mentioned that by mid-August, the daily average of new cases could reach 60,000, with a peak of up to 76,000. In fact, South Korea has seen a rise in new COVID-19 cases for the 5th consecutive week. Last week alone, over 310,000 people tested positive for the virus. That's up nearly 24% compared to the week before. The same official said that a decision on when to lower the disease level will be made after considering various factors, such as COVID-19 trends both at home and abroad, and the advice of experts. The health authority plans to lower the infectious disease level of COVID-19 to Class 4, the lowest level in the 4-tier classification system, as early as this month. With this adjustment, the remaining mask mandate at general hospitals and other high-risk facilities will be lifted. Also, the government will stop monitoring people who have contracted COVID-19. Regarding the complete lifting of the mask mandate, the commissioner stated that specific guidelines will be announced next week after reviewing the risk that the adjustment could pose to high-risk groups. While the KDCA says it is unlikely for COVID-19 to pose a significant threat again, it expects that there could be 1 or 2 surges a year for the time being. It also advises people to wear masks in high-risk places and to quarantine for 5 days if they test positive. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Consumer prices index at home grew at the smallest rate in more than 2 years last month. But pundits fear a potential rebound in broader consumer prices amid the weather factor on agriculture. Min Hee Jin explains.
Consumer prices in South Korea continue to slow in July despite rising vegetable prices following the heavy rain and flooding. Data from Statistics Korea show that the Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of inflation, rose by 2.3% compared to the same month last year. This is the lowest figure seen in over 2 years and marks the 6th month in a row that the on-year rise has fallen.
The key factor behind slowing inflation is a drop in oil prices, which have dropped on year at the largest rate since data was first compiled in 1985.
But given a resurgence in oil prices amid rising summer demand and tightening global supply, this effect may wear off soon, on top of more expensive vegetables. Compared to the previous month, vegetable prices jumped by over 7%. This is largely due to price increases for vegetable crops affected by the heavy rainfall that hit the country last month. According to the Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation, the prices of lettuce and spinach more than doubled within the space of a month. The price of cucumbers also rose by 17% and spring onions by over 23%. With these vegetables among the 144 products measured in the Consumer Price Index for daily necessities, the related index rose by 1.6% on year. And the extreme heat which has gripped the country for the past week or so could continue to affect consumer prices. Owing to the volatility of food prices, Statistics Korea takes an average between 3 values taken throughout the month. As a result, the effects of weather conditions such as rainfall or a heat wave is not greatly reflected in the Consumer Price Index.
While the effects of the monsoon were partially reflected in July's data and may continue to affect the index in August, vegetation also has a short growth period, so it's difficult for us to predict what will happen in August.
Core inflation, as measured by the OECD excluding volatile categories such as food and energy, was up by 3.3% in July, the lowest growth since April last year. Min Hee Jin, Arirang News.
Fitch Ratings has lowered its credit rating for the U.S., citing deepening debt and political polarization. The White House says it strongly disagrees with the decision. Min Hee Jin tells us more.
Fitch Ratings, one of the three major independent agencies that assess creditworthiness, on Tuesday downgraded the U.S.'s long-term foreign currency issuer default rating from the top rating of AAA to AA+. The agency stated that the downgrade reflects expected fiscal deterioration over the next 3 years, a high and growing general government debt burden, and the erosion of governance. Fitch said it had noted a steady deterioration in governance over the last 20 years, flagging the possibility of a downgrade and placing the country's rating on negative watch on May 24th, at the time citing political brinksmanship over the debt ceiling. In June, the government succeeded in lifting the debt ceiling to $31.4 trillion, but only after a drawn-out political battle which threatened to push the country into default. The risk, along with the 2021 January 6th insurrection, were major contributing factors to the agency's latest downgrade. Fitch also noted that a combination of tightening credit conditions, weakening business investment, and a slowdown in consumption could lead the economy into a mild recession in the fourth quarter of 2023 and first quarter of next year. Meanwhile, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen disagreed with Fitch's downgrade, saying in a statement that the change was arbitrary and based on outdated data. She added that the Treasury Secretaries remain the world's preeminent safe and liquid asset, and the American economy is fundamentally strong. The White House had a similar view, saying it strongly disagreed with the decision. The first and only other time that the U.S. has faced a credit rating downgrade was in 2011, when S&P lowered its rating from the outstanding AAA to an excellent AA+. It was following a similar debt ceiling crisis that resulted in protracted negotiations. Min Hee Jin, Arirang News.
Thousands of teenagers from around the globe gathered here in Korea to partake in the World Scout Jamboree as its official opening ceremony starts this evening. Our Choi Soo-hyung is there.
The World Scout Jamboree, the biggest camping festival for young people, began on Tuesday at Saemangeum, Buan-gun County in South Korea's Jeollabuk-do province. Around 43,000 young people from 158 countries will come together, fostering friendships that bridge racial, religious, and cultural divides. This event returns to Korea after 32 years after the country hosted the 1991 edition in Gangwon-do province. But after 6 years of preparation, the venue finally opened with great anticipation.
The World Scout Federation highly praised the successful hosting of the 25th World Jamboree as planned. Additionally, this Saemangeum World Jamboree offers a variety of exciting and memorable programs for young people so that they will cherish their time in South Korea.
Participants from around the world arrived on Tuesday before the official program activities started on Wednesday. They spent the day preparing, including handling the registration process and setting up their tents from morning to late evening. Scouts worldwide are greeted at this welcome center and then move to their assigned accommodation after registration. Despite the long journey to Korea and the scorching heat that left many exhausted, the excitement and joy of meeting new friends, not to mention the anticipation of the 12-day event, were clear to see.
Well, I mostly expect to meet new people, meet internationally new people, get a new network.
Get a lot of new friends from all around the world and experience lots of new stuff here.
Due to Korea's intense summer monsoon flooding the Saemangeum reclamation site until just before the opening, the Scouts managed to create their accommodation by laying plastic pallets and pitching their tents on top. However, despite the extreme weather conditions, the Scouts cherished their camping experience and found joy in preparing for the upcoming programs. The World Scout Federation highlighted how Scout activities help young people overcome difficulties, develop social skills, and be physically healthy. Despite post-pandemic challenges, the Scouts' enthusiasm for the Jamboree in Korea remains undiminished. The opening ceremony will take place at 8 p.m. Korea time on Wednesday. Cheonggyecheon, Arirang News, Saemangeum.
For the past few weeks, a special Korean task force has been in Canada joining a global battle against the country's worst wildfires on record. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau thanked them for their solidarity as the team now returns home. Bae Eun-ji reports.
Around 150 South Korean firefighters have been battling fires in Canada, which has been hit by its deadliest wildfire season on record. The Korean team sent there in early July helped put out wildfires in northern Quebec, one of the worst hit regions, working daily 12-hour shifts before heading back home on Wednesday. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau posted a video on social media of him seeing off the Korean team from Ottawa as they set off for Korea, saying that he thanked them for their heroic work on behalf of all Canadians. He expressed gratitude for their work, for being away from their families for these past weeks, and for coming over to the other side of the world. He also thanked them in Korean.
We will never forget it. Thank you for being here. Have a good flight home. And again, 감사합니다.
In less than 12 hours, the video earned more than 600,000 views. In response, President Yoon wrote on Twitter that he greatly appreciated the Canadian Prime Minister's surprise visit to the airport and added that through the joint operations of the two countries' firefighters, South Korea and Canada have reached another milestone in their long-standing friendship. This also comes as South Korea and Canada celebrate the 60th anniversary this year of their establishment of diplomatic ties. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's new Unification Minister Kim Young-ho will on Thursday hold talks with civic groups dedicated to abductees and prisoners of war detained in North Korea. This is going to be Kim's first official move as the minister, where he will also be meeting families of some of the detainees. The talks will help show the minister's commitment to resolving long-pending issues over South Koreans who have been detained in the North following the ministry's recent announcement to establish a task force in charge of the issue. Kim, in his inaugural speech, had also pledged to find out ways to address the human rights abuses of South Korean abductees in the North. For the first time in South Korea, a drone delivery service has been introduced in an urban area. The service in Seongnam City, Gyeonggi-do Province, targets visitors of the city's water parks. Our Shin Ha-young takes a closer look at what's unique about this drone service.
Drone delivery services have previously been trialed in remote mountainous areas. But now they're a step closer to being commercialized in densely populated urban areas. Starting from August, Seongnam City in Gyeonggi-do Province has become the first urban area in South Korea to launch paid drone delivery services. From August, it started the service at 2 water parks along the Tancheon Stream.
The area around Tancheon Stream is full of pedestrians and people playing or having picnics, so delivering food by motorcycle could be dangerous here. However, drones can fly along a safe path over the river, providing fast and safe services.
When a customer places an order, a drone delivers the items from a delivery hub 1.7 kilometers away and completes the delivery within 5 minutes. Various items can be delivered, ranging from fried chicken and beverages to water play equipment.
I don't find the drone delivery fee too expensive because the cost of other general deliveries is similar to or even higher than this. It's surprisingly fast and I use the service frequently.
There are many regulations related to drones, such as altitude restrictions, making it difficult to introduce drone delivery services in urban areas. Through this paid service, the drone company and the city is aiming to overcome these challenges.
We're in the process of proving the safety of the drones through thousands of trials. This will allow us to deliver to areas including crowded cities. We're working with the Transport Ministry to improve public perception through paid services.
The service is a part of the Transport Ministry's efforts to establish a standardized model for drone delivery in accordance with the country's economic development blueprint called the New Growth 4.0 strategy.
Starting September, we will expand the drone delivery service to multiple locations. Our goal is to give people first-hand experience of cutting-edge technologies. We expect that it will make a significant contribution to the development of flying drone taxi services.
The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport is planning to commercialize drone delivery service by 2027, while doubling the size of the country's drone market to 1 trillion Korean won, or over $770 million by 2025 from 2020. 신하영, Arirang News.
BTS member V will be releasing his first solo album, according to an official statement on Wednesday by Big Hit Music, BTS agency which is owned by Hive. As per V's request, the album's production will be led by Min Hee Jin, producer of girl group NewJeans. During a press conference the same day, V hinted that the album will fully reflect his personal taste and that fans will be able to see a new side of him as a solo artist. V is the last member of BTS to make his solo debut, although further details about the album have yet to be announced.
The stifling heat wave will continue for the rest of the work week across South Korea. Maximum temperatures will be reaching 35 degrees Celsius in Seoul tomorrow. Other regions such as Jeonju and Gangneung will be more sweltering. It will be highly recommended to limit outdoor activities and drink plenty of water. In a few hours at 8 p.m., the opening ceremony for the World Scout Jamboree will begin. Scorching hot conditions will continue for Buanggung County, Jeollabuk-do Province, where the Jamboree is being held. Highs will be peaking at 34 degrees today, and tomorrow will be hotter at 35, along with scattered outbreaks of rainfall. In the meantime, the projected pathway for Typhoon Khanun is subject to change. For now, it is forecast to move towards the east by the latter half of the week, closer to South Korea. The typhoon will bring in a surge of hot and humid air mass into the country, leading to a continuous heat wave. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gwangju will be starting off at 26 degrees. Highs in Seoul will get up to 35, Gwangju 36. Gyeongju will be sweltering at 37 degrees. Sweltering temperatures will continue for the time being, with highs of 34 to 35 degrees. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
baby stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
We deliver stories on site. From Korea to the world, and from the world to Korea. We ask questions every day that could change the world. Taking news a step further, Arirang News. You're watching Arirang News. You're watching Arirang.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Just last week, North Korea staged a massive military parade marking the 70th anniversary of the Korean War armistice called Victory Day by Pyongyang. New drones and ICBMs were featured at the event, attended by senior officials from China and Russia. But a trilateral summit between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo scheduled for later this month, tension on the peninsula is expected to escalate even higher. To discuss the apparent stronger ties with Moscow that Pyongyang is showing off and to ask how the tension will develop, we have invited into the studio Dr. Ko Myung-hyun, a senior fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome.
Good to be here.
And we also have Professor Ramon Pacheco-Pardo from King's College. Professor, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, first question to our Dr. Go. At the Armistice Day parade, new North Korean drones that reportedly resemble U.S. models flew in formation. Now, what would have been the reason behind unveiling such new drones, and what other weaponry could we see?
So I think the reason why North Koreans have unveiled the drones that are almost like the exact replica of the American ones. For instance, even the naming scheme that the North Koreans use for these drones, the larger one they called it Saemangeum 4, and the smaller one they called it Saemangeum 9. In fact, it alludes to the modern names of the American drones they are copying from. For instance, a larger one is a copy of the Global Hawk. The code name for that is RQ4. So they're using Saemangeum 4 to copy, refer to the RQ4, which is a Global Hawk. The smaller one is called, it's actually MQ9, also nicknamed as a Reaper. So then the code name for the North Korean replica is Saemangeum 9. So I think the North Koreans are doing this on purpose, essentially to send a very suggestive message to the United States that they can essentially, maybe they cannot really, leapfrog the American technology, but they can quickly catch up with the American, cutting-edge weapon systems. So I think that's what they're trying to do. So essentially, it's another way of sending a strategic message to Washington from North Korea that they are rapidly advancing their different types of weapons technology, just like their missile program and nuclear program. But then having said that, I think it's also be wrong to focus too much on these drones. These are not major threats to South Korea or the United States or Japan. These are essentially very slow, large drones that are easily traceable or tractable by the defense systems in South Korea and elsewhere. So what are really a threat to South Korea's defense are the smaller drones, such as the loitering munitions that are being operated, they're being used in Ukraine by both parties, Ukraine and Russia. These are really hard to detect because of their small size, and they're very lethal. And there are no easy countermeasures against them. So I think these are the drones that North Koreans are probably putting the bulk of their effort. So the large ones that they have unveiled this time, I think it's more of a political symbol, like a strategic communication, a message to Washington rather than being a real threat to South Korea.
Right, so they're not that threatening to South Korea, but there was a clear intention behind this. All right, now Professor Pacheco-Pardo. So Kim Jong-un, he did not deliver any public speech during the parade, but instead the defense minister, he strongly denounced U.S. and South Korea for enhancing their deterrence posture. Now, what did you make of this message?
Well, I made two main things. The first message is that, in my view, North Korea is worried. North Korea is worried about the growing cooperation between South Korea and the U.S., also, of course, including Japan on a trilateral basis, and that it sees that whereas in the past, during the Trump administration, there were some doubts about the commitment of the U.S. towards South Korea, towards Japan as well. That's clearly not the case anymore. And clearly in South Korea now with President Yoon Suk-yeol, we're going to see a strengthening relations with Washington, especially. That from a North Korean perspective can be seen as threatening. We have seen, for example, a nuclear power submarine coming to American nuclear power submarine coming to South Korea for the first time in decades, and that's a type of message, a very strong message from the U.S. in support of South Korea that North Korea won't like. And also what I see with this is that North Korea is not going to refrain from criticizing South Korea, criticizing the U.S., but especially in this case, I think the criticism was more directed maybe towards South Korea, sending the message, we don't have any intention to talk to you, but we have no intention to back down either. So we're going to continue to compete with you, toe-to-toe, if possible. And I think those were the two main messages in my view.
Right, so it is worried, but it is not going to back down.
That's my impression, yes.
Now, Dr. Go, another notable aspect was how Russian and Chinese delegation were both present at the military parade. What does their attendance suggest?
So clearly, we are seeing a very strong coalition of the like-minded states, I would say. So I'm very careful to characterize this as a coalition rather than an alliance, because alliance is really, we're talking about a much closer, tighter partnership than the one that we are seeing between Pyongyang and Moscow and Beijing. But nonetheless, we are seeing a very close relationship being formed between these three autocratic countries. And I think what motivates these three countries is not so much about whether they like each other. I think it's they have any common ideologies. I think they are united by their very strong anti-Western and anti-American sentiments. The Russian obvious reasons is they invaded Ukraine, and they've been confronted with a very strong coalition of the Western countries helping Ukraine to fight off Russia's attack. China is under strong pressure by the United States in the form of Indo-Pacific strategy, and North Korea has always been isolated from the international community because of its illicit program to develop weapons of mass destruction. But then the commonality across these three countries is their strong anti-American sentiments, and so I think that's the reason why Russia sent Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, to Pyongyang, and also as the Ri Hong-jong, the member of Politburo on the Chinese side, stand side by side with Kim Jong-un on the podium in Pyongyang to show that it's just three countries that are working together against the United States. And the shocking thing is that we're talking about China and Russia, which are permanent members of the Security Council, and they have agreed to pass very strong sanctions measures against North Korea's nuclear program. And right in front of, so that's what happened in the last 20 years. But during the Victory Day parade, North Koreans paraded their ICBM, which is the outcome of the violation of sanctions, in front of the representatives from these two P5 countries, the permanent members of the Security Council. And I'm just, it's mind-boggling how the Chinese and Russians didn't see the irony there.
Right, interesting. Now, let's delve deeper into the ties between Moscow and Pyongyang, Professor. Kim Jong-un apparently introduced North Korea's weapons to Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, giving him a tour of the weaponry exhibition 2023. Now, what might have been the regime's intention with such, weapons sales diplomacy?
Well, I think that North Korea has been one of the very few countries that has clearly sided with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, also when it comes to votes in the United Nations, for example. So in my view, what North Korea is trying to show here is, first of all, that its commitment to support Russia did invade another country, in this case Ukraine, goes beyond words, goes beyond diplomacy. There have been, I think, credible reports that North Korea has potentially been transferring weapons to Russia. And I think that one of the messages is, well, if necessary, if Russia needs further military support, here's North Korea, we have your back, basically. I think that's one of the messages. The other message, I think, is on the Russian side. The Russian side is very openly siding with North Korea. The message, of course, this time may be that Russia may have access to North Korean weapons, but also vice versa. We know that in the past there has been Russian, obviously Soviet in the past, but also Russian support for North Korea's nuclear program, for North Korea's weapons programs. There have been military exchanges in the past, and I think that this shows that this will continue as North Korea starts to reopen after the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the first countries being invited, in this case Russia, and showing the weapons to a Russian delegation coming to Pyongyang. I think there's a very strong message that this security cooperation is going to continue, and that goes beyond Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Right. Now, this is exactly what U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said. He said that Russia visited North Korea to buy arms to aid Moscow's stalled invasion of Ukraine, and some Russian sources are even claiming that Russia is doing exactly that. Now, do you also believe there has been arms sale recently?
I'm definitely pretty certain that that's indeed the case, that there's an ongoing transaction, weapons transfer going on between from North Korea to Russia. We know that Russia has been mobilizing. They're preparing for the second wave of mobilization, and chances that the Putin, the president of Russia, is preparing for long war, and then Russia would require more manpower, more weapons, and it's in the weapon systems that the Russians are suffering from shortages, and North Korea clearly has the ample supply of conventional weapon systems, independent of how qualitatively good they are. But then, having said that, this is a circumstantial context that probably allows us to safely predict that the North Koreans are supplying weapons to Russia. But then we do have actual indications that North Korea indeed did transfer some of the weapons. Late last year in December, the United States government provided photographic evidences of North Korean military supplying weapons, essentially loading up a train with weapons headed towards Russia, and then and after a while, the Ukrainians found that the Wagner Group, the private military corporation that was recently dismantled for having rebelled against Putin, were using these weapons in Ukraine. And more recently, there was a media report where they found that, again, it was ironically the Ukrainians were using North Korean-made weapons, which in turn have been essentially confiscated from Russians by a third country. So clearly, the North Koreans are supplying weapon systems to Russia. But I think the concern is not so much about North Korea supplying conventional weapons, which is a problem for sure, but chance that North Koreans are receiving some advanced weapons or even technology from Russia as a compensation for their assistance with the conventional weapons. So this will be much more threatening to South Korea than seeing Russia and North Korea having a very close partnership with supplying weapons, conventional weapons and munitions to Russia. So I think this is something that we have to be looking out for, because this represents a major transgression, not just by North Korea, but also Russia against South Korea's security.
Right. That being said, Professor, some experts are even suggesting that North Korea might have received some advice regarding the launch of military reconnaissance satellite on September 9th, which is the anniversary of the regime's founding, from Russian delegation that included the experts on that area. Is that likely to have happened? And could this mean, I mean, in what way do you believe the military cooperation between these two countries is going to develop?
Well, we do know that any launch that North Korea conducts is not going to lead to any sanctions on the UN Security Council. So we know that North Korea has the backing of Russia, clearly, and China as well. So I think that North Korea has the door open to continue to test all the different devices and technologies that it wants. We can tighten sanctions, the US, European Union, South Korea as well, but ultimately North Korea is going to continue to receive the economic, diplomatic, and I think also military support from Russia and China. So I do think that when it comes to the area of security that we are focusing on, I do think that there is going to be expertise sharing. I think that North Koreans are going to be able to learn from the experience of Russia in Ukraine, both successes but also the many failures of the Russian army. It is very valuable experience for anyone that might think they may want to invade another country in the future. I'm not saying North Korea is going to do this anytime soon, but obviously they can obtain this expertise that other countries are not going to be able to get hold of. And I also do think that eventually we hope that Russia's invasion of Ukraine will finish, but I think that Russia is not going to forget, or at least the current Russian regime is not going to forget the backing that it has received from North Korea. So I think that in return, in the future, North Korea will be able to get access to Russian technology, Russian expertise, potentially weapons, once Russia has been able to rebuild itself. And this is going to be very valuable for North Korea moving forward.
Right, I see. Now, we have been keep talking about Russia, but I'd like to also focus on China as well. Now, North Korea's media outlets, including Nodongshimin newspaper, featured a significant amount of photos and articles on Russian delegation while paying relatively less attention to China. Why is this?
I think that's exactly what China wanted out of this.
Really?
Meaning, for the Russians, there's now a dilemma for them, because Russia is extremely isolated internationally, and then it's under sanctions, and in many ways very similar to where North Korea is in the international context. It's a pariah state in many ways, or even a rogue state, because it's a repeated violation of the international norms, as well as the constant because they're constantly committing, the Russians are constantly committing crimes against humanity in Ukraine. So in that sense, very similar to North Korea. So there's not much of a surprise to see Russians and the North Koreans stand side by side. And then especially Russia sending on very senior officials such as Sergei Shoigu, the defense minister, to North Korea. But for China, the situation is completely different. There's some expectation that China could play a more constructive role, not just in Ukraine to broker ceasefire between the warring sides, but also keep playing a constructive role for the global governance. And then China also has to watch out for a strong response from Europe, not just from the United States, but from Europe, if China engages in, is being seen as engaging in very close partnership with rogue countries such as Russia and North Korea. So in a sense, China wants to be seen as keeping some distance from countries like North Korea and Russia, independent of what they are doing behind the scenes. We know China has supplied military technology to Russia. We know China is constantly supporting North Korea. For instance, the ICBM that they paraded during the Victory Day parade consists of a Russian rocket, basically with the same design as a Russian rocket, being carried on a Chinese chassis. So it was a collaboration between China and Russia. So China has a very strong partnership with North Korea. It's always transferring key technologies to North Koreans. But then externally, at least, it wants to remain or be perceived as somewhat of a neutral player. And then in order to do that, they need to keep certain distance from North Korea. So when North Koreans didn't really showcase or highlight the Chinese official, Ri Hongzhong, who headed the visiting delegation, that's perfect for the Chinese. There's nothing to upset them.
Interesting. So China is being quite cautious because it needs to consider a relationship with Europe and also
and the international community, its reputation internationally.
All right. Now, Professor Patrick-Pardo, shifting gears a little bit here, experts say China and Russia openly showing their support toward Pyongyang adds a new variable in terms of Seoul and Washington effectively implementing their extended deterrence. How is this so?
Well, I think it's interesting because I do agree with what Dr. Ko said before. I mean, we do have growing cooperation between North Korea, China and Russia, and I think it's mainly because of their opposition to what they see as U.S. hegemony at the global level. I mean, in Europe, we also talk about Iran being another country that joins these three in its open opposition to the U.S.-led international system. And I do think that the three of them are going to continue to strengthen ties as long as Russia continues its invasion of Ukraine. We continue to see tensions between the U.S. and China, which I think are not going to disappear anytime soon. And of course, North Korea sees the possibility of strengthening ties with these two countries, receiving economic support, diplomatic support, military support as well. So in my view, the three of them are going to be opposed to any action taken by South Korea and the U.S. And let's not forget, we're going to have the trilateral summit with Japan coming up very soon. And there is talk that there is going to be a joint statement in which both South Korea and Japan are going to put in written form that a threat to one of them is a threat to the other. And this threat obviously refers to North Korea, but also to China. This shouldn't be forgotten. And I would say from a Japanese perspective, Japan still feels threatened because of its territorial disputes with Russia, South Korea as well, of course, but Japan maybe more so because of the history between the two of them. So I do think that any cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and now with Japan, since it's going to be seen as a threat by the three of them, is going to lead to a response in the form of denunciation of this cooperation between the three of them. We have seen in South Korea, for example, the Chinese ambassador very openly criticizing the current government. So I wouldn't be surprised if something similar happens here when the trilateral meeting takes place, because clearly from a Chinese point of view, plus Russian, plus North Korean, South Korea has taken sides, and Japan of the US, of course, have been cooperating for a long time. And this is detrimental to their own policy towards the region, but also at the global level.
Right. Now, since our Professor Patrick-Pardo brought up this trilateral summit that is going to take place at Camp David, I'd like to ask Dr. Go as well. How do you believe North Korea's nuclear and missile threats should be dealt with during the trilateral summit?
No, it's going to be a very important issue for the trilateral summit. I mean, obviously, it's going to be at the top of the discussion agenda among these three allies. And I think And this is a very important moment for the security cooperation in this region, in Northeast Asia, because the security situation is very fluid. North Korea's missile and nuclear program have reached a very high level of advancement. North Korea has, in fact, attaining level of threat that we haven't seen before. It's not just with the three different types of intercontinental ballistic missile system that they have achieved full development, but also they're on the verge of being deployed. And they have essentially engaged in the mass production of nuclear weapons with a huge number of tactical nuclear warheads. And these are all threats to the region, and not just to South Korea, but also to Japan. And so the United States and its allies, South Korea and Japan, have been stepping up to respond to these growing threats. And I think we have seen this with the normalization of the information sharing agreement, the GSOMIA, and also, but even I would say the nuclear consultative group, which is a bilateral mechanism between Seoul and Washington, has room for expansion, which could include Japan or other like-minded countries down the road. So we are seeing a rapid evolution of the security architecture in Northeast Asia. And this trilateral summit is going to be just the first time that's happening in a long time, but then I think it could be regularized. So I think we are setting the ground for that evolution of a security architecture. So as Professor Pacheco Pardo has mentioned, North Korea is just one of the major threats that the countries that are allied with the United States are facing today in Northeast Asia. China is another looming threat, especially with the tension over the Taiwan Strait. So I think this emerging security architecture could be very flexible and also comprehensive. So in that sense, I think it will be very interesting to see what are the agenda items that will be on the table, and then what kind of outcomes that will come out of the meeting.
Right, I see. Now, Professor Pacheco Pardo, I believe this will be our last question. Now, since we have so many schedules coming up, South Korea, U.S., OG Freedom, Shield military exercise, the Trilateral Summit later this month, what can we expect from the North to do?
I think the missile tests are a given, that they will continue. Potentially other tests like satellite tests, because the technologies can be used also for military purposes. I do think that they will try to ratchet up tensions, diplomatic tensions with South Korea, with criticism of South Korea policy, cooperation with the US, obviously cooperation with Japan as well. And actually, I would expect North Korea maybe trying to work together with China and Russia, if not in the three of them condemning South Korean actions, South Korean actions together with the US. I think that's more unlikely, but at the very least trying to show that the three of them are working together, that they're working with each other, that they form, I agree, this is not an alliance, but a partnership that North Korea can leverage in the future if tensions with South Korea continue to escalate.
Right, I see. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Pacheco Pardo. And thank you, Dr. Go, for your insights and your time. Really appreciate it. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Mabuhay. I am the ambassador of the Philippines to the Republic of Korea,